This year's recipient has represented the great state of Minnesota in the United States Senate since 2007. Since that time, she has been a champion of important legislation that the American Legion has prioritized year after year, and she has tirelessly worked to improve our national security. Her leadership in the Senate is recognized on both sides of the aisle, and we are proud to present the 2024 Distinguished Public Service Award to Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Well, thank you so much. It is such an honor to receive this award. My dad served during the Korean War, and I know he's up there looking down with pride right now. I am deeply, deeply grateful to our veterans for your service, for your sacrifice to our country. And I am also deeply grateful. It's something I see firsthand on the Hill every day, how the Legion has stood up for veterans, also for our active service members, and has taken such a lead in the critical issues of our time. From offering financial assistance to families in need, to championing hard-earned medical benefits for vets exposed to burn pits, so important in my state. I first heard about it from a husband of a vet, Amy Muller. She got pancreatic cancer in her mid-30s, left 3 little babies, and her husband came to me and said, "I'll do anything to make sure this doesn't happen again." And way back then, the Legion was on this. We worked on it. We got the bills introduced. As you heard from Senator Tester, finally got the PACT Act over the line with Dennis McDonough's guiding hand. He's also a Minnesotan, I would add. We were able to get this done. I think half your program so far has been from the state, which makes you all Vikings fans. I know that. My dad actually was the sports writer covering the Vikings and once wrote a book that is sadly still relevant today. And this was the title of it in the early 80s, called "Will the Vikings Ever Win the Super Bowl?" That is a true story. So, whenever I meet with our men and women in active service, I'm always reminded when we send them overseas, we make a promise of how we're going to treat them when they're there with the equipment, with what they need, but also how we're going to treat them when they come back. And that's where the burn pit bill, of course, was so important. And it wasn't just, as you know, about recent conflicts. It was also about those exposed to Agent Orange. And it was very important to us that those vets got covered because that promise made way back then wasn't kept. And it was our duty to continue that work and to make sure it was kept. The other thing I want to talk about, 2 more things that have come up recently, and one was the military confirmations. As you know, for 10 months last year, a single senator from Alabama, hi Alabama people, thank you, played politics with our national security, blocking hundreds of military promotions and holding the entire military chain of command hostage. So there was a group of senators from both sides of the aisle, right? That's important to note. Senator Reed and Senator Graham, Young, Tester, Ernst, Sullivan, Romney, that put pressure on this senator by repeatedly going to the floor. The American Legion and dozens of veterans groups said enough is enough. And finally, we took a bill to the Rules Committee that I chair to change the Senate rules. And we were able to pass out a rule that was clearly, we'll call it a shot across the bow, that made it very clear we were going to change the rule unless the senator backed down. And after that, we got an agreement. And so it was my honor to have led that committee, got that vote, and what my guiding principle is this. When our soldiers signed up to serve, there wasn't a waiting line. And when they come home to the United States of America and they need health care, or they need housing, or they need a job, or yes, they deserve a military promotion, there should never be a waiting line in the United States of America. But we all know that national security is both about our men and women in uniform and those who stand side by side with our troops. And in this case, which I have so appreciated the American Legion's leadership, I cannot tell you how critical it's been with my colleagues, is we are talking here about the brave Afghans who served with our soldiers and our troops over in Afghanistan. They put their lives on the line. Many of them lost their lives. Their families' lives are still on the line if they're still over there in Afghanistan. Let me tell you some examples of who we're talking about. Manaz, a commander of the Afghan National Army's female tactical platoon who worked closely with our military. She is an example. She facilitated discussions between our soldiers and Afghans when they were on the battlefield. Ahmad, a pilot whose helicopter was shot down not once, but twice. Speaking of his work with our American troops, he said, "In the face of danger, we were united. We were relentless. We were resilient." Another helicopter pilot, so many of them don't want their names known because their families are still at risk back in Afghanistan. A helicopter pilot who worked with our troops to combat the Taliban in remote areas of Afghanistan for 8 years and survived after being shot in the face by flying bullets. Nangyale, an Afghan interpreter who put his life on the line to support our troops. Why? To use his words, same goals, same target, same achievement. We must keep our covenant. And if you haven't seen this movie that Guy Ritchie did, there's a movie out there called The Covenant, which I make all my colleagues watch, and then they get on the bill. Okay? The Covenant. We must keep our covenant with our heroes. They fled Afghanistan. They live in limbo in the U.S. now. There's 80,000 of them, and they have been here for quite a while, but they live here literally with a trap door underneath of them. They have to apply and reapply every time just to stay here without any clear path for residency. One of them in Virginia, who was working 2 jobs as an Uber Lyft driver, was shot, killed in the middle of the night. They deserve that permanent residency, followed by what we call the gold standard of vetting. So for some of my colleagues who have joined this bill, and we have the ranking Republicans on armed services, foreign relations, judiciary, Senator Lindsey Graham introduced the bill with me. For some of them, this is actually about that vetting. It is a security issue. We will be able to vet the people once this law is passed. And that's why we have 60 organizations and the American Legion, of course, one of the lead groups supporting this bill. We were so close a few weeks ago with the Ukraine funding, and by the way, Hungary just voted to include Sweden in NATO. That just happened an hour ago. We were so close in getting this included. It was included in the actual package that was agreed to with Senator McConnell and Langford and others. It got stripped away not because of the bill, but because of some other issues related to the border. But I feel even better about the fact that we're going to be able to include it in some vehicle going forward. And I just will need your help to get that done. We now have Senator Mullen is on the bill. I could go on and on about the number of conservatives that we have gotten to join the bill, with Senator Jerry Moran, the lead Republican on the Veterans Committee, leading the amendment with me. Because I figure when America makes a promise or a covenant, we keep it. And if we don't keep our word in this case, it will be very hard for others, and this is where the national security interest hits in, to want to join us in the future. So I thank you for your support. Last, I want to end with some wisdom from the late, great Senator John McCain, an irascible character who was such a good friend of mine. He taught me so much. I traveled the world with him. To Vietnam, stood in front of the cell where he had been held for over 5 years. It was in that cell that he made the decision to let others be released before him because he knew they were trying to mess around with his head and with our country by allowing him to be released first because his dad was in a high-ranking position in the military, and he made that decision by himself in that cell to say no and stayed there under torture for years. The last time I saw John, after traveling with him and Senator Graham to Ukraine on the front line and going to all kinds of Baltic states and trips that I can't even tell the stories here, I'd get in trouble. But the last time was when my husband and I went to visit him and Cindy at their ranch in Sedona, this beautiful Red Rock area. And John, as you know, was dying. And he was laying in this bed looking out in that beautiful, beautiful ranch land. And he was having trouble talking, although he still made some jokes to me about where the Ukrainian machine gun was that the former president of Ukraine had given him on a stage, and the Navy confiscated the weapon. And he turned to me and said, "Where's my machine gun?" But at the very end, he couldn't talk as much. And he said, "This is what I want you to remember." And he opened one of his books, and he pointed to this line. And this is the last thing he basically said to me by pointing to the line. "Nothing in life is more liberating than to fight for a cause larger than yourself." That, to me, is what service to our country is all about. And it is embodied by all of you and the millions of American Legion members across this country. We are truly a grateful nation. We are grateful for your service and sacrifice, for your honor and heroism, for your duty and dedication. May we always remember and remain grateful to all our veterans who have made America safe and strong, and it is on all of us to carry on that torch. Thank you for helping me and so many of us in Washington that stand by your side to do that. Thank you.